This is things I wish I could say in Sunday school. I want to share some thoughts and ideas that are different than what we usually hear. My goal is to be really honest rather than inherently faith-promoting. I hope these ideas may spark some interesting discussions with your friends, families, or classes. Please enjoy. This is the lesson for June 1st through 7th, Ruth, and 1 Samuel 1 through 7. Today's topics are Ruth and Hannah and Eli. Today we're starting with the book of Ruth, one of only 2 books in all the scriptures named after a woman. It's just Ruth and Esther. One of the best things about Ruth is that it's centered around women. Ruth is the main character and Naomi is next. However, there are plenty of problems with Ruth. I'll start by recapping the story. A man from Bethlehem moved away to Moab because there was a famine. His 2 sons married local women instead of Israelites. The father and his sons die, leaving Naomi the mother, and Orpah and Ruth her daughters-in-law. Naomi tells Orpah and Ruth to return to their own fathers since their husbands were deceased. Orpah complies, but Ruth doesn't. I'll read the famous verse that often gets read at weddings and stuff. This is Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." At first glance, this is a beautiful sentiment. I could feel good saying most of it to my wife and meaning it. The most generous meaning we can give it is that we are a team. I will love and support you wholeheartedly and hope to receive the same in return. But that's not really what the text says. It says that I am latched onto you. You are responsible for me. I think Naomi was overwhelmed after the death of her husband and sons. I don't think she was in a position to be responsible for anybody but herself. The way I see it, Ruth has 3 basic options. 1, follow Naomi's directive like Orpah did and return to her father. 2, leave and forge her own path. Or 3, what Ruth chose to do in the story, stay against Naomi's wishes. Ruth is an economic burden on Naomi. Naomi is responsible now for Ruth's food and shelter. It makes me wonder how awful the other options were. How bad would things be if she went back to her father? How bad would it be if she tried to go off on her own? Pretty awful, I imagine, if staying against your matron's wishes is your best option. Now back to the story. Naomi and Ruth go back to Bethlehem. Their richest kinsman is Boaz. Ruth decides to glean in Boaz's fields, hoping to find grace in his sight. Naomi approves the plan. Ruth is going to hang around Boaz's property trying to get noticed. So maybe he'll want to have sex with her, and then that will improve their economic prospects. It ends up working. Boaz marries Ruth, and Ruth becomes the great-grandmother of King David, another non-Israelite in the lineage that leads to Christ. One of my frustrations with Ruth is that I want real women heroes, and she does a lot of weak things. Folding into Naomi's life instead of forging her own, trying to entice Boaz for her economic prosperity. I understand that it was a very different time and culture. I also think she was doing her best with only bad options. I try not to judge, but I admit that I hope for better women heroes. The last thing I want to mention about Ruth is going back to the famous verse that's often read at weddings. Whither thou goest, I will go. People seem to praise and enthusiastically encourage blind loyalty. There's a difference between choosing to place your trust or faith in someone, or say a church, versus going all in with blind loyalty. Faith can be courageous. Being able to truly trust your partner is sweet and beautiful. But there are limits, and it's not necessarily permanent. It's also an act of strength to know your limits in advance. If your partner cheats, for example, or they simply change to where they aren't a good partner anymore, it's healthy to know what kind of behaviors in your partner you will not tolerate. Blind loyalty is just unhealthy. You're choosing to fold your life into someone else's and basically give up yourself. That's not strength, it's weak. Blind loyalty to anyone is bad. Whether it's a romantic partner or your parents or church leaders, it sets you up to be abused. Abusers can sense when people have blind loyalty and they exploit it. I think it's really important to distinguish between blind loyalty and choosing to place your trust in someone with limits. And we have to stop teaching that blind loyalty is good or beautiful. It's not. It's a recipe for abuse. The rest of the lesson is about the early days of Samuel. I love Hannah. I love that she's willing to make any sacrifice she's capable of to have a child. I don't understand giving up that child to the high priest. It's weird. I know in the story Samuel becomes a prophet and judge of Israel, but she gave her young son to the high priest Eli, and he was an awful father to his own sons. For those of us who are parents, our responsibility is to care for the well-being of our children and teach them how to be good adults and kind to others. I could never abdicate that responsibility. However, I feel like I see some families at church that do abdicate some of the raising and teaching of their own children to the church. They rely on church teachers and lessons and youth leaders to teach their kids, instead of making it their own priority. Like, as long as their kids are in the church program, it will get taken care of so that parents can focus on other things, like their own church callings or whatever. Serving a mission is kind of the coup de grace. If they can keep their kids on the church program through a mission, then their kids will have learned to be good adults, and they have fulfilled their parental responsibility. You've probably seen plenty of families that seem to operate this way too. It's easier to just do the church program than to forge your own path as parents. But I think it's really important and worth the effort. In this story, Eli's sons abused their position as priest to profit off the sacrifices of the people and have sex with many women. Eli knew about it, but did not stop them, even though it was his responsibility as high priest to do so. His failure as a parent led to his failure as high priest, and then the downfall of his entire family. Take your parental responsibility seriously to really raise your kids to be good, kind adults. Don't abdicate it to the church, or even mostly to your partner. It's not fair for either partner to feel primarily responsible for this. Teaching your child how to be a good person needs to be a joint venture that you're both fully invested in. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Please share with family and friends. Until next time.